The glass shattered beside Abigail's head just as she ducked. Fragments sprayed across the marble floor while security alarms screamed through the executive corridor. 2 guards burst through the stairwell doors, shouting orders, their boots pounding against polished tile. Abigail didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the emergency exit, heels clicking sharply as she yanked off her blazer and tossed it behind her, revealing the sleek black dress she had worn specifically for speed, not elegance. "Stop her," one of the guards yelled. She shoved open the exit door and rushed down the stairs, gripping the metal railing as she leaped entire flights at once. Her heartbeat stayed controlled, her breathing steady. Panic was for amateurs. Timing was everything. She reached the parking garage, scanning quickly until she spotted the black sedan waiting near pillar C-17. The driver's window rolled down just as she approached. "Get in," Andrew Wolfe said coldly. She slid into the passenger seat, slamming the door just as 2 guards burst into the garage behind her. Andrew pressed the accelerator without another word. The tires screeched as the car shot toward the exit ramp, leaving the chaos behind. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The city lights streaked across the windshield as silence filled the car like tension waiting to snap. "Did you get it?" Andrew finally asked, his voice calm but sharp. Abigail reached into her clutch and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it between 2 fingers before dropping it into his hand. Internal transaction records. Board member bribes. Illegal offshore transfers. Everything he tried to bury. Andrew glanced at the device, his jaw tightening with satisfaction. "You're efficient." "He underestimates everyone," she replied evenly. Andrew studied her profile as he drove. "Not everyone." She didn't respond. The car slowed at a red light. Andrew finally turned toward her, his gaze piercing. "You realize what you just stole will destroy Alexander Voss." Abigail crossed her legs slowly, her expression unreadable. "That's the point, isn't it?" He held her gaze for a moment longer before the light turned green and he drove again. What Andrew Wolfe didn't know was that Alexander Voss wasn't just a rival billionaire Abigail had been hired to destroy. He was her father. And she had just stolen the first weapon meant to ruin him. 3 weeks earlier, Abigail had walked into Andrew Wolfe's penthouse office for the first time, already knowing accepting his contract would change everything. Andrew stood beside the panoramic window overlooking the city, his back turned as she entered. The skyline stretched behind him like he owned it personally. Without turning, he spoke. "You're late." "I was early," she corrected calmly. "Your assistant delayed me intentionally." He turned slowly, revealing sharp features carved from discipline and anger. His dark suit fit like armor, his presence colder than the marble beneath their feet. "I like to observe how people react to inconvenience," he said. "You didn't complain." "Complaining doesn't solve problems." His lips twitched slightly, almost approving. He walked toward his desk and slid a file across the surface toward her. "I need someone who solves problems." She opened the file and froze for only a fraction of a second before masking it perfectly. Inside was a photograph of Alexander Voss shaking hands with government officials during a corporate summit. "You want corporate sabotage," she said smoothly. "I want annihilation," Andrew corrected. "His empire. His reputation. His legacy. I want him to watch everything he built collapse." She flipped through the pages, though she already knew most of what was inside. Financial allegations. Insider trading accusations. Fraud investigations that had mysteriously gone cold. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're the best infiltration specialist operating in international corporate networks," he replied bluntly. "And because you have no emotional ties to your targets." She closed the file slowly. "If I accept, I work alone. No interference. You'll have unlimited resources. I set the pace. I expect results." She extended her hand. Then we have an agreement. Andrew shook her hand firmly. What made you accept so quickly? He asked, studying her carefully. Her eyes held his without hesitation. I don't like men who hide behind power and pretend they're untouchable. If Andrew noticed the flicker of personal hatred behind her words, he didn't comment. That night, Abigail sat alone in her apartment staring at the photograph she had secretly taken from the file. Her thumb brushed across Alexander Voss's face. Memories she had spent years burying pressed dangerously close to the surface. Her mother coughing into a blood-stained handkerchief. Hospital lights flickering overhead. The silence of a man who never came back. She flipped the photo face down and closed her eyes. This ends now, she whispered to herself. Abigail's official entry into Voss Global came disguised as a rescue operation. The company had recently suffered a series of public scandals, and she arrived as a crisis management consultant hired to stabilize investor confidence. The first time she stepped into the executive boardroom, her father sat at the head of the table. Time slowed. Alexander Voss looked older than she remembered. The commanding presence remained, but exhaustion lined his face in ways photographs never showed. His silver-streaked hair was pulled neatly back, his posture still straight, still powerful. He didn't recognize her. Ms. Cross, correct? He asked politely, gesturing for her to sit. Yes, sir, she replied, her voice flawlessly steady. Throughout the meeting, she observed everything. Board members avoiding eye contact. Legal advisors whispering urgently. Financial projections showing hidden panic beneath polished presentation slides. Alexander spoke with authority but also restraint, listening more than commanding. It didn't match the monster she had built in her mind for years. After the meeting, he approached her privately. You've reviewed our damage reports? He asked. I have. And your assessment? You're not losing because of external attacks, she said. You're losing because someone inside your company is feeding your competitors strategic vulnerabilities. His gaze sharpened instantly. Do you have proof? Not yet, she answered. But I will. He nodded slowly, studying her face like he was trying to place a memory that refused to surface. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Her pulse jumped once, but she simply offered a professional smile. I get that often. Over the next 2 weeks, Abigail balanced two worlds with surgical precision. By day, she strengthened Voss Global's public defenses. By night, she fed Andrew carefully selected information designed to weaken them internally. Their strategy meetings became frequent. Private. Intense. You're moving too carefully, Andrew said during one late-night call, his voice echoing through her apartment speaker. Precision creates permanent damage, she replied, typing rapidly as she encrypted files. Recklessness creates temporary victories. You sound like you're protecting him. She paused, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. I'm protecting your outcome, she corrected. Silence stretched across the line before Andrew spoke again, quieter this time. He destroyed my family's company when I was 23, Andrew said. He framed my father for embezzlement. My father lost everything in 1 month. Abigail leaned back slowly, her chest tightening. My mother killed herself 6 months later, Andrew continued. The words landed heavy between them. I don't need revenge, Andrew said. I need justice. Abigail swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain neutral. And destroying him will give you that? It's the only thing that ever will. She stared out her apartment window at the glowing city skyline, her reflection staring back like someone she barely recognized. You trust me a lot for someone you've known less than a month, she said quietly. I trust results, he replied. His voice softened unexpectedly. And I trust you. The words hit her harder than any confirmation ever could. Days later, Abigail discovered irregularities buried deep within Voss Global's archived financial transactions. Patterns that didn't match Andrew's claims. Evidence that suggested someone else had orchestrated the downfall of Andrew's family company years ago. Before she could dig deeper, her office door opened. Alexander Voss stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I need your honest opinion," he said. She straightened slowly. "About what?" "Someone has been sabotaging my company for years," he said quietly. "And I think they're about to make their final move." Abigail's pulse quickened. "What makes you think that?" she asked carefully. Alexander hesitated, then placed a thin folder on her desk. "Because the same person already destroyed someone else I once considered family." Abigail stared at the folder, dread curling through her stomach. "Who?" she asked softly. Alexander met her eyes with unexpected sadness. "Andrew Wolfe's father." Abigail's breath caught. And for the first time, she realized the war she thought she understood had only just begun. Abigail's fingers remained still on the folder Alexander had placed in front of her. The air between them felt suffocating, heavy with truths neither of them fully understood yet. She forced herself to maintain composure, sliding the folder open with deliberate calm. Inside were archived merger proposals, transaction trails, and legal disputes dating back nearly 15 years. The name Wolfe Industries appeared repeatedly, buried beneath settlement claims and failed acquisition negotiations. "You were business rivals," she said carefully, scanning the documents. Alexander shook his head slowly. "Not rivals. Partners." That single word hit her harder than she expected. "We were building a joint tech infrastructure network," Alexander continued. "It would have dominated the European financial market. But someone started leaking false regulatory violations tied to Wolfe Industries." Abigail swallowed, keeping her expression neutral. "And you didn't investigate who?" "We tried," Alexander said. "Every lead vanished. Evidence appeared, then disappeared. By the time investigations ended, Andrew's father was already being prosecuted." Abigail's throat tightened. "Why didn't you defend him publicly?" she asked. Alexander looked away toward the glass wall overlooking the city below. "Because someone threatened my family." Her heart slammed once, painfully. "What kind of threat?" "Proof fabricated to show my company was laundering funds through offshore shell corporations," he replied. "If it surfaced, it would have destroyed us both. Whoever orchestrated it made sure I stayed silent." Abigail's pulse raced. Her instincts screamed that she was standing inside a truth far more dangerous than she expected. "And you never told Andrew?" she asked quietly. Alexander laughed bitterly. "By the time I tried to reach him years later, he refused to take my calls. I don't blame him." The room fell silent. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're the only person who's been able to trace the sabotage patterns inside my company," he said. "I want you to find whoever is behind this before they destroy what's left." Abigail met his gaze, her emotions clashing violently beneath her calm exterior. "I'll find them," she said. She just wasn't sure whose side she would be standing on when she did. That night, Abigail sat inside Andrew's penthouse office, reviewing encrypted files projected across his glass wall monitor. Andrew stood beside her, his presence radiating intensity as he studied every detail she displayed. "You're telling me Voss had partnerships with my father?" Andrew asked sharply. "Preliminary negotiations," she corrected. "They never finalized. That's not what our historical audits show." "I know," she replied, scrolling through financial timestamps. "That's why this matters. There are discrepancies in both your company's archived records." Andrew folded his arms, his expression darkening. "Are you suggesting my father fabricated evidence?" "I'm suggesting someone manipulated both corporations simultaneously." He stared at her, searching her face as if trying to decide whether to trust her or dismiss her entirely. Every investigation blamed Voss, Andrew said. Every investigation used evidence that appeared suddenly and disappeared just as quickly, she countered. That's not coincidence. That's orchestration. Andrew turned away, walking toward the bar near the window. He poured himself a drink, gripping the glass tightly. You're asking me to question 15 years of hatred, he said quietly. I'm asking you to question whether someone benefited from it, she replied. He drank slowly, his jaw clenched. You sound like you're defending him. I'm defending facts, she said firmly. He set the glass down harder than necessary. Facts don't change what happened to my mother. Abigail hesitated, guilt twisting sharply inside her chest. I know. He looked back at her, something vulnerable flickering beneath his anger. You don't, he said. You don't know what it's like watching your family fall apart while the man responsible builds an empire. Abigail forced herself to hold his gaze, her voice softer now. Maybe I understand more than you think. The tension between them shifted, becoming dangerously personal. Andrew stepped closer, his eyes searching hers with unsettling intensity. You never talk about your family, he said. There's nothing worth talking about, she replied quickly. That sounds like a lie, he said. She stepped back slightly, breaking the closeness before her control slipped. We're not here to discuss me. Andrew studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. Find me proof, he said. Real proof. And if someone else is responsible, I want them destroyed. You'll have it, she promised. Days passed with Abigail diving deeper into financial archives, cross-referencing corporate takeovers, legal disputes, and confidential board communications. Patterns began forming with chilling clarity. One name appeared repeatedly across shell companies, anonymous transactions, and confidential advisory signatures. Victor Kane. The name lingered in corporate documentation linked to both Andrew's and Alexander's business histories. He had served as a financial strategist for Andrew's father before transitioning into a senior advisory role within Andrew's current corporate structure. Abigail stared at her screen, dread pooling in her stomach. If her suspicion was correct, Victor Kane had been standing beside Andrew while orchestrating the destruction of his family. Her office door opened suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned to see Alexander stepping inside again, his expression tense. Board meeting moved forward to tomorrow, he said. There's an emergency shareholder vote attempting to force executive restructuring. Hostile takeover attempt, she asked. Yes, he confirmed. And whoever is behind it is moving faster than we anticipated. Abigail nodded slowly, her mind racing. Mr. Voss, she said carefully, has Victor Kane ever worked directly with your company? Alexander frowned slightly. Kane consulted briefly during international expansion negotiations years ago. Why? No reason, she replied smoothly. Just cross-checking historical advisors. Alexander studied her, suspicion flickering briefly before he nodded and left the room. The moment the door closed, Abigail grabbed her phone and dialed Andrew. He answered immediately. Tell me you have something, he said. I need to meet you, she replied. In person. They met inside Andrew's private conference suite 30 minutes later. He stood at the far end of the room as she entered, tension radiating through his posture. You look like you just discovered something catastrophic, he said. I think I did, she replied. She connected her tablet to the screen, displaying overlapping transaction trails, company partnerships, and legal documentation timelines. Victor Kane appears in both corporate structures during critical failure periods, she explained. He advised your father months before regulatory investigations began. Then he disappeared from public involvement. Andrew's eyes narrowed. And resurfaced when I built Wolfe Holdings, he said slowly. Yes, Abigail confirmed. Right when your company began expanding aggressively. Andrew walked closer to the screen, studying the evidence carefully. "He's been my chief financial advisor for 8 years, Andrew said quietly. Abigail nodded. "Which means he has full access to your strategic planning, internal transactions, and corporate intelligence." Andrew turned toward her slowly, disbelief and fury colliding across his expression. "You're accusing the man who helped rebuild my empire of destroying my family." "I'm saying he benefits if both you and Alexander destroy each other," she replied. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, pacing across the room. "Why would he do that?" he demanded. "Control," she said simply. "If both corporations collapse, Kane gains access to controlling assets through hidden investment networks." Andrew stopped pacing, staring at her intensely. "You're asking me to investigate my most trusted advisor based on circumstantial patterns." "I'm asking you to verify the patterns," she corrected. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Andrew spoke again, his voice dangerously quiet. "If you're wrong." "I know," she said. "And if you're right," he continued, stepping closer, "then everything I've believed for 15 years is built on lies." She held his gaze steadily. "Do you want the truth, or do you want revenge?" The question lingered between them like a loaded weapon. Andrew exhaled slowly, the conflict visible across his face. "I want both," he admitted. Later that evening, Abigail prepared to leave Andrew's penthouse when he stopped her near the doorway. "Stay," he said suddenly. She turned, surprised. "Why?" "Because every time you leave, I feel like I'm losing control of something I don't fully understand yet," he admitted quietly. The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. "You don't strike me as someone who struggles with control," she said. "I don't," he replied. "Except with you." Her pulse quickened, emotions tightening dangerously in her chest. She stepped closer without fully realizing it. "This is complicated," she whispered. "Everything worth having is," he said. He reached up slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, unexpected, almost hesitant. "You're the only person who's ever stood beside me without fear," he murmured. Abigail's breath caught. The warmth in his gaze shattered the emotional walls she had built for years. "Andrew," she started softly. Before she could finish, he kissed her. The moment was intense, charged with unspoken confessions and buried pain. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before responding, her hands gripping his suit jacket as emotions she had buried beneath duty surged to the surface. For the first time since accepting his contract, she forgot about revenge. Forgot about secrets. Forgot about the war she was standing in the middle of. But across the city, inside a dimly lit office overlooking Financial District towers, Victor Kane watched surveillance footage displayed across his private monitors. His cold smile deepened as he observed Andrew and Abigail together. "Right on schedule," he murmured to himself. He reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Prepare the shareholder vote," he ordered calmly. "And send Andrew Wolfe the files revealing Abigail Cross's real identity." He paused, glancing back at the screen as the two figures remained locked in a moment neither of them realized would soon be shattered. It's time they both learn who they've really been working for. Abigail barely slept that night. The warmth of Andrew's kiss still lingered on her lips, clashing violently with the evidence she had uncovered about Victor Kane. Every emotion inside her felt like it was pulling in opposite directions. By morning, she had buried it all beneath her usual calm precision. She arrived early at Voss Global headquarters, scanning overnight financial reports while replaying Andrew's vulnerable confession in her mind. She hated how easily he had started breaking through her defenses. She hated even more how much she had wanted him to. Her office phone rang sharply, snapping her back into focus. "Ms. Cross," Alexander's assistant said urgently, "Mr. Voss needs you in the executive boardroom immediately." Abigail grabbed her tablet and moved quickly. When she entered the boardroom, tension hit her like a physical force. Investors sat along the polished table, several faces she didn't recognize. Alexander stood at the head, his posture rigid but controlled. "What's happening?" she asked quietly as she took her seat beside him. "Emergency shareholder vote," Alexander replied under his breath. "Someone is attempting to force immediate restructuring of executive leadership." Abigail scanned the investor list displayed on the overhead screen. Her stomach tightened as she recognized several shell corporations she had traced back to Kane's hidden investment network. "Who initiated this?" she asked. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Anonymous proxy acquisition through third-party investors." Before she could respond, the main doors opened. Victor Kane stepped inside, his calm smile instantly commanding attention. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair immaculate, his movements precise and confident. Abigail's pulse spiked. "I apologize for arriving late," Kane said smoothly, taking a seat near the center of the table. "Traffic was inconvenient." Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. "You were invited to observe, Mr. Kane, not participate." "Of course," Kane replied politely. "I'm simply here representing shared investment interests." Abigail watched him carefully, her instincts screaming louder with every second. His gaze swept across the room before settling briefly on her. His smile deepened slightly, like he was acknowledging a private joke she hadn't been told yet. The vote proceeded quickly, aggressively. Board members argued, investors demanded immediate restructuring, and financial accusations surfaced without warning. Abigail responded strategically, dismantling several claims with documented counter-evidence, but the pressure intensified with each passing minute. When the meeting finally adjourned, the board agreed to reconvene in 48 hours for a final decision. As investors filtered out, Kane approached her calmly. "Ms. Cross," he said pleasantly. "You've made quite an impression inside Voss Global." "I focus on results," she replied evenly. "I admire that," he said. "Efficiency is such a rare quality." Alexander stepped beside her, his expression guarded. "Is there something you need, Mr. Kane?" "Not at all," Kane replied. "I simply wanted to compliment your consultant's performance." His eyes returned to Abigail, sharp beneath his polite tone. "Perhaps we should speak privately sometime," he added softly. "I prefer transparency," she said coolly. "Transparency is overrated," he replied, his smile never fading. "Secrecy tends to be far more profitable." He walked away before she could respond, leaving unease trailing behind him like a shadow. That evening, Abigail arrived at Andrew's penthouse with fresh data. She found him standing near the window, staring out at the skyline, tension radiating through his posture. "You look like someone just declared war," she said as she set her tablet on the table. "Maybe they did," Andrew replied without turning. He handed her a printed dossier. Her breath caught instantly as she saw her own childhood photographs staring back at her. Hospital records. Birth certificates. Archived family photographs she thought had been buried years ago. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely controlled. "It arrived anonymously this afternoon," Andrew said, finally turning toward her. His eyes were colder than she had ever seen them. Silence stretched between them like breaking glass. "Tell me it isn't true," he said quietly. Abigail swallowed, her throat tightening painfully. "It's true," she admitted. "You're Alexander Voss's daughter," he said flatly. "Yes." The word shattered everything between them. Andrew laughed once, sharp and humorless. "How long were you planning to tell me?" "I didn't plan to tell you," she admitted honestly. His expression darkened with fury. "So everything was a lie?" "No," she said quickly. "The investigation is real. The evidence about Kane is real. My feelings." "Don't," he snapped. She flinched slightly but didn't look away. "You let me trust you," he continued, his voice shaking with restrained rage. You stood beside me while feeding information to the man who destroyed my family. I never fed him anything, she said desperately. I was gathering evidence. I was trying to stop this from escalating. You accepted the contract knowing who he was, Andrew interrupted. Yes, she admitted. His eyes closed briefly, pain flashing across his face before hardening again. Get out, he said quietly. Andrew, listen to me. Get out before I forget why I don't destroy people who betray me. The words hit like knives. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She picked up her bag slowly, her hands trembling only slightly. You're making a mistake, she whispered. No, he replied coldly. I made one the moment I trusted you. She walked out without looking back. Hours later, Abigail sat alone in her apartment, staring at her dark reflection in the window. Her phone vibrated repeatedly with unknown numbers she ignored. Her mind replayed Andrew's shattered expression, his voice cracking beneath betrayal. She didn't notice the message notification from an encrypted private network until several minutes later. Unknown sender, meet me. Parking structure level 3. Voss Tower. Midnight. Her instincts screamed danger. But she already knew who had sent it. The parking structure was nearly empty when Abigail arrived. Her heels echoed softly against concrete as she stepped out of the elevator. The dim overhead lights flickered, casting long shadows across parked vehicles. Victor Kane leaned casually against a black sedan near the far end, hands tucked into his coat pockets. You're punctual, he said as she approached. You're predictable, she replied sharply. He chuckled softly. I prefer the word prepared. Why expose my identity to Andrew, she demanded. Because emotional instability accelerates corporate collapse, he replied calmly. And Andrew Wolfe becomes wonderfully unstable when betrayed. You manipulated both families, she said, fury rising. You orchestrated everything. Kane's smile widened slightly. Orchestrated is such a dramatic word. You destroyed lives, she pressed. I created opportunity, he corrected. She stepped closer, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Why? Because your father and Andrew's father were building an alliance powerful enough to eliminate independent investment networks like mine, Kane said smoothly. Their partnership would have monopolized half the global infrastructure market. So you destroyed them both, she said. I redirected them, he corrected again. And now their companies stand vulnerable, perfectly positioned for acquisition through my subsidiaries. Her hands clenched at her sides. You used me, she said. I guided you, he replied calmly. You were always going to accept Andrew's contract. Your resentment toward your father made you predictable. Rage burned through her chest. You destroyed my family. I revealed your family's weaknesses, he said. There's a difference. She stepped even closer, lowering her voice. I'm going to expose you. Kane tilted his head slightly, amused. No, you won't. He pulled out his phone and displayed a series of financial records showing encrypted transfers connected to Abigail's infiltration activities. These documents suggest you orchestrated insider trading within Voss Global while simultaneously manipulating Wolfe Holdings, he said calmly. They would destroy both corporations, and place you at the center of international fraud investigations. Her blood ran cold. If you reveal my involvement, Kane continued, these files reach federal regulators within minutes. You'd destroy yourself too, she said. On the contrary, he replied. Every transaction routes through shell corporations legally insulated from personal accountability. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You will continue destabilizing Voss Global while Andrew accelerates his corporate attack. When both companies collapse, you disappear quietly. And everyone survives, except them. Her chest rose and fell sharply. And if I refuse? She asked. Andrew Wolfe will spend the rest of his life believing the only woman he ever trusted manipulated him for revenge, Kane said softly. That sounds like a rather cruel legacy for someone you seem to care about. The words hit her harder than any threat. Kane stepped back, adjusting his cuffs calmly. You have 24 hours to decide, he said. After that, events proceed without your cooperation, and far less mercifully. He walked toward his car without another glance. Abigail stood frozen, her entire world collapsing inward as she realized every choice she made now would destroy someone she cared about. Across the city, Andrew sat alone in his office, staring at Abigail's childhood photographs still lying on his desk. His phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming reports about shareholder movements targeting Voss Global. He ignored them all. He picked up the photograph again, studying the innocent smile frozen in time. His anger warred violently with memories of her voice, her honesty, her quiet strength. His assistant's voice interrupted through the intercom. Sir, Victor Kane is requesting immediate strategy consultation regarding the takeover timeline. Andrew stared at the photo for a long moment before placing it face down. Send him in, he said coldly. The door opened moments later as Kane entered, his expression composed and respectful. I trust you received the documents regarding Ms. Cross, Kane said calmly. I did, Andrew replied. And your decision? Andrew's eyes hardened into something dangerous. My decision, he said slowly, is to finish what we started. Kane smiled slightly, satisfied. Neither of them noticed Andrew's grip tightening around the glass in his hand until it cracked under pressure, blood sliding silently down his palm. Abigail drove aimlessly for nearly an hour after leaving the parking structure. The city lights blurred past her windshield while Kane's ultimatum echoed relentlessly inside her mind. Every road she turned down felt like it led to the same inevitable disaster. If she stayed silent, Andrew would destroy her father and hand everything to Kane. If she spoke, Kane would destroy Andrew's empire and frame her as the architect of both downfalls. Her phone rang again. Andrew's name flashed across the screen. Her breath caught. She almost answered. Her finger hovered over the screen. Then she remembered the cold fury in his eyes when he told her to leave. She let the call ring out. Seconds later, a message arrived. Andrew, the takeover begins tomorrow morning. Stay out of it. The word stabbed deeper than she expected. Not because of the threat, but because of the distance behind it. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing herself to think. Emotional decisions would destroy all of them. Strategy was the only path left. The next morning, Abigail walked into Voss Global headquarters earlier than usual. The building buzzed with nervous energy. Assistants whispered in corridors, analysts rushed between offices, and emergency board discussions filled every conference room. Alexander stood inside his office reviewing financial projections when she entered. He looked up, relief flickering briefly across his face. You're here early, he said. There's something we need to discuss, she replied. He gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk. Go ahead. Abigail remained standing, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide their trembling. You're about to be targeted by a coordinated takeover led by Wolfe Holdings, she said. Alexander nodded slowly. I expected that. You're not prepared for how aggressive it will be, she continued. And you're not prepared for who's actually behind it. He studied her carefully. You've discovered something. Yes, she said quietly. Victor Kane orchestrated the collapse of Wolfe Industries years ago. He also infiltrated your financial network to destabilize your company from within. Alexander's eyes widened slightly before narrowing in grim realization. I suspected someone manipulated those events, he admitted. But I never had proof. He's manipulating Andrew now, she said. He's pushing him into destroying you both so he can seize control of your combined assets. Alexander walked toward the window slowly, processing her words. And how do you know all of this? He asked. The question hung heavy between them. Abigail inhaled slowly. Because Andrew hired me to infiltrate your company. Silence slammed into the room. Alexander turned toward her slowly, disbelief and heartbreak colliding across his face. You were working for him? He asked. Yes. And you're telling me this now, why? His voice trembled slightly despite his effort to remain composed. Because I won't let Cain destroy both of you, she said firmly. Alexander studied her face carefully, searching for deception, betrayal, or weakness. What he found instead seemed to break something inside him. You're her daughter, he whispered. Abigail's composure cracked for the first time. You knew? I suspected, he said quietly. The moment you walked into that boardroom, you looked exactly like your mother. Emotion surged through her chest so violently she had to grip the chair beside her to stay steady. You left us, she said, her voice shaking with years of buried pain. You let her die thinking you abandoned us. Alexander's eyes filled with raw regret. I stayed away because Cain threatened to destroy both of you if I tried to contact you again. I thought distance would keep you safe. Tears burned her eyes despite her efforts to remain strong. She needed you, Abigail whispered. I know, he said hoarsely. And I will regret that failure for the rest of my life. Silence stretched between them, heavy with lost years and broken trust. Finally, Abigail wiped her eyes and straightened. We don't have time for this, she said. Cain plans to frame me as the architect behind financial sabotage within both companies. Alexander's expression hardened instantly. Then we expose him first. We can't, she said. He has contingency evidence that would destroy Andrew's company and send me to prison. Alexander stepped closer, determination replacing his sorrow. Then we outmaneuver him, he said. Across the city, Andrew stood inside Wolfe Holdings' executive boardroom as legal advisors finalized hostile acquisition contracts. His expression remained unreadable, but tension radiated from every movement he made. Victor Cain stood beside him, reviewing digital projections with calm satisfaction. Once these shares transfer, Voss Global's board loses controlling authority, Cain explained. Their collapse will follow within weeks. Andrew nodded slowly. And the financial regulators? Already distracted by ongoing investigations, Cain replied smoothly. Everything proceeds without interference. Andrew stared at the contracts in front of him. His mind kept drifting back to Abigail's voice, her insistence that Cain was manipulating them both. He hated how her words refused to leave him alone. Mr. Wolfe? Cain prompted gently. Andrew picked up the pen and signed the final authorization document. Proceed, he said coldly. Cain smiled faintly. An excellent decision. Later that afternoon, Abigail and Alexander sat inside a secure conference room reviewing encrypted evidence she had compiled. Every document traced Cain's hidden investment network, shell corporations, and financial manipulations connecting both corporate collapses. We release this publicly, Alexander said. It's not enough, Abigail replied. Cain will trigger his contingency files before regulators can verify anything. Alexander leaned back, frustration flashing across his face. Then what do you suggest? Abigail stared at the data projections silently before speaking. We force Cain to reveal his entire network publicly, she said. How? Alexander asked. By giving him something he can't resist controlling personally, she replied. Alexander studied her carefully. What? Me? His expression darkened instantly. Absolutely not. It's the only way, she insisted. He believes he controls me through blackmail. If I pretend to cooperate, he'll bring his entire acquisition network forward to finalize control over both corporations. You're asking me to let him use you as bait, Alexander said. I'm asking you to trust that I can trap him, she corrected. Alexander shook his head firmly. I already lost your mother. I will not risk losing you too. Her chest tightened painfully at the words. You lost us both years ago, she said softly. This is our chance to fix what he destroyed. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, pain etched across his face. When he opened them again, determination replaced hesitation. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it together. That night, Abigail sent Kane a single encrypted message. Abigail, I'm ready to cooperate. His reply arrived seconds later. Victor Kane, I knew you would make the intelligent choice. He instructed her to meet him inside a private financial exchange building the following evening to finalize asset transition strategies. Abigail stared at the message, dread crawling through her chest. She knew she was stepping directly into Kane's control. The only question was whether she could dismantle it before it crushed all of them. Meanwhile, Andrew sat alone in his office long after employees had left for the night. The city lights reflected across the glass walls, casting fractured shadows across the room. His phone buzzed again with corporate updates confirming early acquisition success. Voss Global's stock value was already beginning to plummet. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out Abigail's childhood photograph again. His thumb brushed across her smiling face unconsciously. His phone rang suddenly, breaking the silence. The caller ID displayed an unknown encrypted line. He answered cautiously. Who is this? Abigail Cross is walking into Victor Kane's trap tomorrow night, Alexander Voss said bluntly. Andrew froze. She believes she can expose him, Alexander continued. But Kane plans to destroy her the moment he secures full corporate control. Andrew's grip tightened around the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because she's risking everything to stop him, Alexander said quietly. And because despite everything, she still believes you'll choose truth over revenge. Silence stretched between them. You're asking me to trust you, Andrew said coldly. I'm asking you to save her, Alexander replied. The line went dead. Andrew stared at the dark screen, conflict tearing through him violently. His entire life had been built around hatred for Alexander Voss. Every instinct demanded he ignore the warning. But Abigail's voice echoed through his memory. Do you want the truth, or revenge? Andrew grabbed his coat abruptly and walked toward the exit, his decision forming with dangerous clarity. Rain fell steadily against the glass walls of the private financial exchange building as Abigail stepped out of the elevator onto the top executive floor. The entire level was silent, abandoned except for the dim lighting guiding her toward the central conference suite. Her pulse remained steady, but tension coiled tightly inside her chest. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a collapsing maze. She pushed the glass door open. Victor Kane stood near the center table, reviewing holographic financial projections floating above a digital console. He didn't look surprised when she entered. If anything, his expression carried quiet satisfaction. Right on time, he said smoothly, without turning. You wanted cooperation, Abigail replied calmly, stepping inside. You have it. Kane finally turned toward her, studying her face carefully like he was measuring the sincerity behind her words. I trust you understand the consequences if this is another attempt to deceive me, he said. I understand perfectly, she replied. He gestured toward the display. Once Voss Global and Wolfe Holdings complete asset collapse, these holding corporations will assume majority control. You will transfer internal Voss infrastructure codes and Andrew Wolfe strategic counter-defense protocols. Afterward, you disappear. Cleanly. Quietly. Abigail stepped closer, scanning the display while discreetly activating the encrypted transmitter hidden inside her bracelet. It began streaming everything in the room directly to Alexander's secure network, and to a second location she hoped was still listening. You've planned this for years, she said. Decades, Kane corrected proudly. Power requires patience. You destroyed 2 families, she pressed. I redirected global markets, he replied calmly. Personal casualties are unfortunate but necessary. Abigail forced herself to remain composed while her transmitter silently uploaded his full confession across encrypted corporate channels. You think Andrew will recover from this? She asked. He will survive, Kane said. He's strong enough for that. But emotionally, he'll remain broken. Broken men are easier to control. Her jaw tightened slightly. And me? She asked. You were always a useful variable, Kane said with a faint smile. Your resentment toward your father made you easy to guide. Your emotional attachment to Andrew made you easy to silence. Before Abigail could respond, the conference room doors slammed open. Andrew stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes blazing with fury. Kane's smile faded instantly. Well, Kane said slowly, this is unexpected. Abigail's heart slammed violently. Relief and fear collided inside her chest. Andrew's gaze locked onto her first, pain flickering behind his anger. Then his eyes shifted to Kane, darkening into something lethal. You've been manipulating both corporations, Andrew said quietly. You orchestrated my father's downfall. You orchestrated everything. Kane straightened, regaining composure quickly. You're emotional, Andrew. That makes you reckless. Andrew stepped further into the room. You framed my father. You pushed my mother into suicide. Kane sighed, almost bored. Your mother's fragility was not my responsibility. The words exploded through the room like a detonated bomb. Andrew lunged forward, grabbing Kane by his collar and slamming him against the table. You destroyed my family. Andrew roared. Security alarms blared suddenly as Alexander entered behind Andrew with federal regulators and corporate investigators flooding into the room. It's over, Kane, Alexander said firmly. Kane's eyes flickered toward Abigail as realization dawned across his face. You recorded everything, he said quietly. I told you, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Transparency can be profitable. Kane laughed softly, shaking his head. You think this ends me? He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small remote device. Abigail's blood ran cold. Every contingency file connected to your infiltration activities is prepared for release, Kane said calmly. The moment I activate this, Abigail Cross becomes the most wanted corporate criminal in 3 continents. The room froze. Andrew's expression shifted instantly as he looked toward Abigail. She held his gaze, silently apologizing for everything she had hidden. Do it, she said quietly. Andrew turned toward her sharply. What? If he releases those files, they'll destroy your company, she said. They'll destroy your entire legacy. Let him expose me. No, Andrew said instantly. Andrew, she whispered, stepping closer. This was always my responsibility. Kane smirked slightly, enjoying the tension. Andrew stared at her, emotions tearing across his face before something inside him hardened into absolute certainty. You really think I'd sacrifice you to save my empire? He asked quietly. Her breath caught. Andrew turned slowly back toward Kane. Release whatever you want. Kane blinked, caught off guard. Wolfe Holdings has already transferred majority assets into independent trust networks outside regulatory reach, Andrew continued. Your files won't destroy me. Kane's composure finally cracked. And Abigail Cross, Andrew added firmly, stepping beside her, works for me. Which means every accusation against her becomes a legal attack against Wolfe Holdings' executive infrastructure. Silence slammed through the room. You're bluffing, Kane said. I'm adapting, Andrew replied coldly. Federal investigators moved forward as Kane realized his final leverage had evaporated. He stared at Abigail one last time, fury and disbelief burning through his expression. "You were supposed to be predictable," he muttered. "I grew up," she replied. Security officers pulled Kane away as he continued struggling, shouting legal threats that dissolved into meaningless echoes as he was escorted out. The room finally fell silent. Abigail stood frozen, the weight of everything crashing down around her. Slowly, she turned toward Andrew. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. He stared at her, rainwater still dripping from his coat onto the polished floor. "I should have listened to you sooner," he replied. Emotion surged between them, heavy and raw. "I betrayed you," she said, her voice trembling. "From the beginning. You protected me," he corrected. "Even when I refused to see it." Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Andrew stepped closer, his voice lowering. "This isn't forgiveness. This is choosing who matters more than pride." She looked at him, disbelief and hope colliding painfully. "I don't know how to rebuild this," she admitted. "Neither do I," he said honestly. "But I'm willing to try, if you are." She nodded slowly, her heart finally releasing the tension it had carried for years. Behind them, Alexander watched quietly, relief softening his expression. When Abigail turned toward him, uncertainty filled her eyes. "I don't know how to fix us either," she admitted. Alexander stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "We start by not walking away again." She hesitated only briefly before stepping into his embrace, years of distance collapsing in one fragile moment. Weeks later, global financial headlines exploded with news of Victor Kane's arrest and the dismantling of his international investment network. Wolfe Holdings and Voss Global announced a strategic alliance designed to rebuild both corporations through shared infrastructure development. Inside a quiet rooftop lounge overlooking the city, Abigail leaned against the glass railing as Andrew approached, handing her a glass of wine. "You look like someone who finally won a war," he said. "I look like someone who survived one," she corrected. He smiled faintly. "Same difference." They stood beside each other in comfortable silence, city lights stretching endlessly below them. "You know," Andrew said after a moment, "if you ever decide to disappear, I'll probably burn down 3 continents trying to find you." She laughed softly. "That sounds inefficient." "It's personal," he replied. She turned toward him, her expression softer now. "I'm not disappearing." "Good," he said quietly. They clinked glasses gently as the skyline shimmered around them, no longer a battlefield but a new beginning. And if you've stayed with this story until the very end, drop a comment telling us whether Abigail made the right choice choosing love and forgiveness over revenge. Don't forget to like the video if this story kept you hooked, and subscribe to the channel for more intense billionaire drama, emotional betrayals, and unforgettable romances just like this one. Because sometimes the most dangerous wars aren't fought between enemies. They're fought between the people we love and the truths we're afraid to face. Do let us know where you're watching from. Thank you.